everybody can make sure their phones are silenced, please. Adam? Tanner, you good? Okay, well, thanks everybody for coming. We're going to start this off with some opening comments from Coach Mendenhall. After that, we will open it up for questions. Please identify yourself so Coach Mendenhall can get to know all of you. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it'd be great. Just barely finished the staff meeting in here as well. So, man, the context shifted pretty quickly from getting ready for practice to now talking about our program on a broader perspective, which I'm happy to do both. Later today, 3 o'clock, my team will be in here, which is my favorite part. So no slight against any of you, but I love the development of young people. It's my absolute passion. And I get to do it through really good football, which is super fun. That's been my career's work and my life's work. I think some in the industry, they love the football part and they just use the players for that. I would flip the script. I love the development of young people. I use football for that part. That doesn't mean just any type of football. Winning absolutely matters. Championships are fun and are expected. But I also love a style of play that reflects effort and grit and resilience and camaraderie and a culture that's formidable in something that when you witness it, you sense that's being played differently. So it's not only what we do, but it's how it's being done that resonates. I've always admired this valley, the type of people that are here. Wow, to settle the valley. Strong, tough, resilient, independent. And I think there's an element of blue collar and hard nosed and resilient and self-reliance, and that is manifest and always kind of has been on the best Utah State teams that I've seen and played against. I'm anxious to do my part as a steward of the program now to lead that program that reflects the identity of a place, not just a team at an institution, but a style of play and with young people that truly kind of honor something bigger than that and the heritage of a particular area. So really excited for the beginning of a new era. And again, it's the beginning. We're not midway, we're not at the end, we're at the beginning. And so I'm anxious for that and all that comes with it. I'm also super passionate about transitions and taking on hard things and taking on organizations and helping them become better. And I believe that's happened at each place that I've been able to coach. And that's something that's really important to both my wife, Holly, and I, that not only is the program better, the community itself, the conduct of our players, the institution itself, the grades, which have already been the best in school's history since we've arrived. Change matters to me. Seeing young people change, seeing institutions change, seeing the community become better because of a football team. Some don't think that's possible. I think it's ideal and it's totally worth pursuing. So that's what you can expect, at least as a starting point. Certainly glad to take questions now from anyone that has them.
Jason Walker with Cash Valley Daily and 106.9 The Fan. I'll start you off with a really complicated one.
Great, can't wait.
The house settlement has been a pretty big talking point.
We're going to start with that then,
Yeah.
are we?
What are your thoughts as far as how that impacts Utah State specifically, at the very least the football program?
Yeah, I think I'll go broader first. So the house settlement, so a lot remains to be seen as to what effects it's going to have. Certainly something needed to happen, meaning that the past few years with the collectives being the primary funding source for student athletes that are playing the game, which was once illegal to pay young men to play. And while there were specific rules that said pay for play was not allowed, it really was the primary focus of every contract given to a young person is performance-based. And so what you hear now of true NIL, that actually means what NIL was supposed to be to begin with, and that meant if I had a contract with you, and let's say you're a car dealer, you might give me a car to drive, and I would then appear for, I don't know, maybe 5 TV spots, 10 radio ads, social media content, and that at fair market value was supposed to reciprocate and be equal to fair market value. So that lasted about a week, and then it went to how good a player are you, how much would it take to have you come as a recruit, what will then take to keep you based on your play. And anyway, that escalated pretty quickly, which we all in the industry knew it would. The regulation arm of the NCAA was nowhere possible or capable of managing that, nor could they, quite frankly, manage the existing recruiting rules that were happening before money was even added. We already knew that was kind of the hole in the system, the enforcement part. So now the House settlement. The intent then is to diminish or to de-escalate the funding of the collectives as the primary source of income going to add more regulation, which means the money then would come institutionally. 20.5 million would be the salary cap, basically, or supposed to be. And then if your program had happened to generate enough revenue, let's say you generated at least 20.5 million, you could then distribute that amongst your sports by different percentages to then have it regulated. And the enforcement arm basically was built into the institution because of the dollar amount. That doesn't mean the collectives now go away. It just means they were supposed to be held truly just for true NIL purposes. That could then compensate above and beyond the institutional delivery. And that's not including Title IX, which then usually is what percentage for each sport will the money that you have. Now, here's the thing in terms of Utah State, other programs around the country. So how many are truly funded well enough to distribute 20.5 million? That would be a fun exercise to do. How many have that to distribute? And then now if you go to future Pac-12 schools, existing Mountain West schools, how many of them are actually generating revenue? And so what if there's no revenue to share? Therein lies the majority of college football programs. With no revenue to share, the House settlement simply means you have a roster size now diminished to 105. DSAs can add a little bit more. The same donors that were giving to the collective now have a chance to basically donate to the university in a specific sport fund, which can be distributed that way. It just now is coming from a different source. But until institutions, including Utah State, find additional ways to generate revenue above and beyond what the existing funding sources are, then really the House settlement doesn't have as much effect because it's not really affecting revenue stream. So interestingly enough, which we already know, college athletics is finance and profit oriented. It is business. TV contracts matter. Most schools that are now changing conference, which we are one of, or that have realigned, have done so primarily for the generation of money, which comes through television, right? Television contracts help. That will have to be subsidized by other revenue generating streams that institutions are all working wildly to generate. At the same time, you've also seen athletic departments cutting support staff. And so here's leaner to generate and have more money available, realignment happening, and then somewhere originally contracts, there's something called NIL Go now. This is a long answer to your question, isn't it? I'm going to keep going though, and you can sound bite it out. But really, NIL Go is now charged with the idea of when contracts are submitted for a student athlete through a collective, is it for a legitimate business purpose? So many schools around the country had their contracts rejected because they weren't viewed as legitimate business purposes because it was more pay for play. Well, so NIL Go basically said we're going to not qualify or not pass any of those contracts that come from a collective, and then less than 2 weeks later rescinded that, and now it is a legitimate business purpose, a collective is. The changes are amazingly fast and so uncertain and unstable as to what direction it's going to go. In the meantime, the young people are great. College football is a cool sport. The purpose that can be generated by a leader and for the growth of young people and for the community can still be had. The landscape is ever changing. So Utah State is right in the middle of that. Conference realignment coming, awesome, fantastic thing. Where the revenue and how that will be generated, still a work in progress for most college programs. The only ones that currently are advancing because of this whole thing are the ones that have significant revenue existing already to share. And your own research can determine how many of those there truly are.
Following up on that.
Wow, that was a fast follow-up. That was just like a seamless, just kind of keep going.
Clearly, your joy is, you talked about it, your joy is coaching people and helping people develop. I'm curious how much your job as a head coach has changed, especially lately versus earlier in your career.
Man, that is a perceptive question. I would say that, and I'll strive to put a percentage on it. When I became the head coach at Brigham Young, I was the head coach and defensive coordinator, and I coached the nose tackles, just because I love the middle of all the action. And I really didn't have much else to do in terms of fundraising. At that particular place, the firesides representing our faith, speaking, that was part of it. And that was kind of an additional thing, as well as so many players that were married. And so, man, there was kind of marriage counseling as this thing that was, I didn't know was part of the thing. Now, in the world of head coaching, the generation of revenue, the fundraising is beyond what I ever expected, and the management of that. And if you're part of a staff, as many programs are leaning out, I do have a chief of staff who would serve as my, also he doubles as my general manager, I would say. I'm still involved in what the contracts could look like for our players, and so the generation of money, the distribution of money, at the same time of coaching the football team, it's disproportionate now to non-football, probably for the first time in my career. So the number of things I'm doing now and the time spent, the tipping point has happened with the new financial landscape, where as much as I'm working hard for the competitive work, which is winning the game, developing young men, and helping us have a great football program, you could say this other part is now separate. I view it as the competitive enabling work, which is enabling us to do this. But man, is that taking a lot of time, energy, and effort. But it's also necessary. And so the less revenue a school has, the more the head coach takes on multiple hats. And I'm wearing that hat at a high level now. The institution, though, just hired, and you'll have to look up the name specifically, either director of NIL strategy or something like that, which is a huge benefit to the athletic department. So that's going to help. But my time specifically, I've never spent this much time in my career in relation to what revenue streams look like.
Another big picture question about your job. I know when you got hired, you talked about expectations and the matching that with the commitment from the university. Now that the AD and president that hired you are gone,
I'm taking. You think that was personal? Do you think it was just like I think I ran him off?
I just feel like, do you feel like there's still that commitment and the expectation matching for you, even with the change?
So that the quick answer is yes. Man, I've really enjoyed visiting and my interactions with our current president, President Smith, and that's just been a joy. What's also been really fun, I just met Sandy Barber yesterday, who's kind of serving as the interim while the athletic director search goes on. And just, wow, the experience, and having been at Notre Dame and Cal and et cetera, right? And so much fun just to have points of reference, and for someone that connects really quickly, that reflected to me, like her interim hire reflected to me the continuation of the direction we're already going. And so I'm really excited. The commitment to the Pac-12, the interim AD hire, the trajectory and the momentum to keep all that going, I haven't seen one sign yet that reflects anything other than we might be more committed now than even when I was hired. And so while the president has changed, the athletic director has changed, what I've seen, the decisions in the meantime have reflected doubling down on the direction rather than stepping away from the direction.
Coach Mendenhall,
Hey.
Andrea Urban with Fox 13. Hello.
Hi.
I want to ask you about the guys that stuck around for this new era of Utah State football. Bryson Barnes, Ike Larson, just to name a few. What stands out to you about those guys that you wanted to, because you also had to keep them around in your program as well as them staying. So tell me about that mutual coach-athlete partnership there.
Yeah, really a new era. And I mentioned at Media Days, and Doug has helped me clarify this a little bit just last night. So we've added 87 new players to our roster. What I didn't clarify in Las Vegas is 17 are on missions. So 70 right now, 17 will enter at some point. Still, that's a lot. so the players that did remain, I think it's partly indicative of a coaching change where there's that few, but also when players play well, and Ike has played well at Utah State, Bryson has played well as an experienced player, it becomes more impactful when a player stays if they had already played well at their existing place, because quite frankly, the opportunities they have, and I'm talking monetarily, to leave significantly outpace the existing place they are if they played well. And so there has to be something about either the new leader, the new approach, or quite frankly, they just love the place. And I'll let each one of them speak for themselves. But I believe in self-selection. And that means they weren't made to stay. I was very transparent, and the program will be very demanding. This will be the most difficult thing any of these young people have done in their lives by design to help them become. And so my hope is that they're finding I delivered on my promise of what it would be. The reason they chose to stay is reflected in what they're experiencing. And if it's not, then that's my fault for not presenting it clearly enough. That would be dishonest. My intent was to make sure the kids knew what this was going to be, look at the track record, gauge to say, wait, I think that's going to work here as well. They would then choose, but know they're choosing something that's going to be extremely difficult and challenging. And that's the only way I could make sense of accepting their commitment to stay, is giving them the best chance to know what it was going to be. And so for players like you mentioned and others, the only way I could be at peace with it is trying to be as articulate and clear as possible what they would be signing up for. And so when you visit with them today, hopefully they say it's what I was told and even more. If it's not, then yeah, not a good trade for anybody. And that would just be at the expense of saying something to have somebody stay, and that would be pretty self-serving, which I'm not for. I want these kids to have an amazing experience, so that they did stay, super grateful. I also think that they'll end up being really grateful they did, because of what the program will do for them and what they'll do for the program. And ultimately that's more of what college football, I think, should be. Somehow navigating this other space in a way then that builds young people and builds a team and doesn't make it just a group of mercenaries looking for checks. And I'm not for that, and our program doesn't reflect that.
You talk about what they're signing up for. So what do you want this team's identity to be, and were you able to build and accomplish that also with the new additions from your transfer portal?
So we certainly have selected against the criteria I have, which are extreme expectations. By program design, again, my passion is the development of young people. That happens when they're asked to do things beyond what they've ever done. And when they reach a new level, they're asked to do something else that they'd never done or that's more challenging. And when they hit that level, and it just keeps going. And it ends up producing, our system and our program ends up producing resilient, capable, confident, and responsible people. It just happens through sport. And so we select against telling someone, as a recruiting message, this will be difficult every single day, but it will be great every single day. And who you'll become will be something that you couldn't have been unless you took this on. And so that doesn't sound like a typical college football program, and I don't want it to be. And I would hope when we play, it doesn't look like typical college football. And it might be plays being run, but how they're being run, with what commitment level, with what passion, with what culture, with the sideline support, with the unity. I'd like all that to be just dripping off of our team. And usually it becomes noticeable to the people that watch that something's happening here. Yeah, we're playing football, but the way we're playing it, there's something different happening. If that doesn't show, then don't feel like I'm doing my job. When it does, regardless of outcome, because, well, in my life, I've tried really hard at times and felt good about the effort and didn't have success, yet I was good because I knew, and that was everything I had. And I wasn't as strong on that day as what was needed, but I learned and I could move forward. And I like young people that carry themselves that way, where they did everything they could do. My job is to help that be enough for wins to happen too. And that's how I get to stay in Logan. And if I don't, then I don't.
When you bring players with you, like Ohio and some of the guys from New Mexico. How important is it? Obviously, they're good players, but how important is that for players that have experienced those expectations
Yeah.
and that to come in
Yeah.
and be kind of helping guys within that locker room also know what the expectations, what the payoffs can be from those expectations?
Yeah, I love just the train of thought. It's one of the reasons, I'm going to expand a little bit further on that, rather than just the players coming from New Mexico. The group I was just speaking to before I'm speaking with each of you, were my staff. They're all former players of mine. So the modeling, and we just addressed this yesterday in a staff meeting, in a real cool documentary and a study that I won't go into now, but the effect of modeling on young people. And a great role model for a young person that's deciding the speed in which information can be diffused by not necessarily even words, just seeing what it looks like day in and day out. Man, is that powerful. Some of us had that with parents. When coming to a new program, I have a whole staff now that has been part of my program, and their position groups look at them and like, oh, that's what that looks like. That's what we're to look like. Now, when you put a sub-level in there of players coming from a program I've just coached who are still active, and let's say they're the highest performers currently, and our team is watching them, oh, that's what that's supposed to look like. Or I see that, and it's just day after day after day. There's momentum generated because the players can see from an older level of staff, man, I would like to be like him, meaning their coach, or man, I would like to be like him, that's another coach. And then they see a level of player, wow, that looks like that guy except younger. This program, there's a credibility that's generated through the models that they see that is really important for speed, because in today's world with that many roster changes, the expectation is still to have success. It accelerates the speed, but if anything else, it creates alignment and a motive to where they're not wondering if it's going to work. They're seeing, oh, that this works. Not only in the individual and who they're becoming, but quite frankly, and usually the number of wins at an institution, it manifests.
How has your relationship with Jan Jorgensen kind of evolved from when you first met him to now, and how much did you keep up with him when you went over to UEA and now hired back on the staff?
Man, that's a really good question. So Jan, nicknamed Janimal, when we were at BYU, led the Mountain West Conference in sacks, and just a really good player, and fierce and tough and resilient and capable and really aggressive. And just a great player to have in our program. And as the defensive coordinator and as a defensive-minded coach, the mindset in which he played really resonated so many of the values that I was espousing and wanted to have as part of our program. When I went to UVA, I watched from afar, and there was cage fighting, and there's marriage. Those things might not seem to go together, right? And there's a raising of a family, and there's the passing of a child. And a former coach of mine was working there at the time and giving me kind of narratives on who he was becoming through all of that. And so, yes, I was watching from afar and paying attention. And then when having a chance, as I re-entered football at the University of New Mexico, I had followed enough, thought enough, not only before as a player, but during and watching who he was becoming, that I thought that would be a great mentor / role model for the next generation to see. And when you put the fighting with the playing and the parenting and the loss and the maturity, I was just, man, a young person would be lucky to be in that meeting room if he was their position coach. And so the competency was there for sure, so that box was checked. But also the compassion box was checked, which is interesting because of how aggressive and how the physical presence at the same time. So it's this imposing package physically with all these cool other traits of integrity and substance blended in there. And our players are the ones that benefit. And I thought that, saw that before he was hired at New Mexico, saw that there, and that's why he's now here.
Coach Mendenhall. Oh, sorry. Jason Turner from the Herald-Journal. Wide receiver room was kind of one of the biggest question marks coming into the fall camp. Not a lot of guys started experience. So I just wanted to ask you, how did that room come along during spring camp, and who really asserted themselves heading into fall camp?
Yeah, part of inheriting a new program, you assess what the roster looks like as best as possible, as fast as possible, and then you work to select and assess players to address your needs, and that position certainly was one of them. And wow, we've done a nice job. Meaning that the players we've added have done a lot of times in the recruiting process, especially in a transition and especially under a tight time frame. A lot of that time, or a lot of those circumstances, usually lead to inaccuracy or not enough depth to truly have gone deep enough to know what you're going to get. And so, anyway, we added a young man with the last name of Pagan, right, from UCLA, and wow, has he performed at a really high level. We added a young man with the last name of Boyd, right, and he's coming from another Division I program, and he's performed at a really high level. Demeek Starling played for me at Virginia. Who would have guessed that he'd still have eligibility, right? Went to another school, and now he's here. But a different version and an older, more mature version, but chose this program twice. He's done a really nice job. Then Corey Thompson from UNLV, currently battling a shoulder injury. But I guess my point is, when we went for experience to address the lack of starters, I believe we went 4 for 4. Not only on the quality of player, but the type of person. And that's really helpful. We've also added high school players to the existing players that were already on the roster, which I like, the existing players in the room, but added 2 freshman receivers as well. And so we now have tiering, right, of upperclassmen, existing players in the program, and then younger players. And so the room has become healthier pretty fast. We're not as deep as I would want yet, but we're on our way. And so I think we've done a nice job with the time we've had.
Coach Tanner Tripp, KSL Sports. You talked about how a community can change with a good football program. How have you seen that throughout your career as you've kind of rebuilt these programs, and how do you think Logan can change and rally around a good football team?
It's a really good question. Each community has its own identity already, and I think what a great football program does is just highlight and accelerate that existing direction. And sometimes it could ignite past values that maybe were there but have just become dormant. Other times it's a celebration of the identity of the place. And so I don't know if you take programs, or it could represent a faith, right? So I've been part of that at BYU, a good football program. People walk into church a little happier on Sunday. Now that doesn't mean it should be, right? But is that the case? I've watched it. And how could that be? It's football. And how should that tie? But it kind of does, because it represents, at least there, right? If you were to say, I don't know, if you've ever been to, in North Dakota, at North Dakota State, and just say, man, does good football matter there? Absolutely. I guess my point would be, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Washington State comes in as a top 20 team. New Mexico hadn't beaten one of those teams in 80 years. I saw people in the stands, literally they're crying, former players that I'd coached the first time, and they're wearing their Letterman's jacket, right? But it's not, I mean, they're wearing it like, and they're just different in Albuquerque because of a success. If the program is aligned and worked to align itself with a community, then it reflects, which highlights the existing cool values already. Logan, I think Holly and I, we knew we would like it here after being here before, raised in the state, playing games here. Man, called lots of names here for sure as a former coach of a different place. But the community itself, we always thought, man, how come we're not there? That would be a great place. Total underestimation on our part. This is a magical place. And the value, the people and the values, I just think with the coach in a program that's trying to reflect those values through a game, and certainly it will take success. I'm responsible for that. But when that comes together, it's just, I think the identity is enhanced, the community is tighter, and everyone just is a little happier that they get to live here, and it's one other cool thing that represents this community. And so I've just seen it reflect I think maybe the mindset, but also, this is probably too strong a statement, but to some extent, the well-being, right, of a community is like based on outcome, which is, you shouldn't think, we wouldn't think would be possible, but I watched it. And when you start seeing all the businesses flying the colors of their team, not only for football, basketball, other sports, softball, soccer, there starts to be the sports programs at Utah State are actually part of and embedded, and it kind of isn't now separate. It's like one thing. And I think we're still a ways from that, but I've seen it before here and anxious to relink if possible.
Time for one last question.
One last question.
Coach, Patrick Abraham from the Aggies. I'm curious here, you've not given out the numbers yet. How do you assign those? Is that done in a batch, like all at once, or do you do that individually?
Yeah, it's not done in a batch. We actually have a system, it's more like the NFL draft where it's then rounds. And so, but I wait as long as possible to be as accurate as possible. So the team will vote on team leaders here as they get ready to come back for fall camp. And there's been a pseudo structure of that going through the summer where when the coaches aren't here, team or position group leaders are running the meetings for their teammates that are part of the optional and voluntary structure that happens in July. Anyway, when the team comes back, we formalize that structure. Each position group votes for basically a leader at that position group. We call that, for lack of a better name, the Leadership Council. And then as late in camp as possible, and this will be probably a week and a half in, maybe 2 weeks in, for the Leadership Council to be established, those players then are responsible and tasked with providing me the order in which this team will be qualified to select their jersey. They don't select their number, but they select who has earned the right to pick first. That player then can go up on that draft night. There's usually 2, maybe 3 during fall camp. And in front of the entire team, all the jerseys will be lined up. Their name is called. That player will say something about them. They'll come pick their number, whatever number they want. And then they sit down. And then whoever the Leadership Council has selected as pick number 2 walks up and picks their number. And so it's in descending order based on the values of our program and the leaders of our team. I don't pick them. And so if any player might have an issue, that's feedback coming from their peers to them and where they fit. That process goes on, by the way, at the end of fall camp, because you can't play without a number. It goes on every Thursday all the way through the season. There'll be players that will be week 10 without a jersey, week 11, week 9. That process keeps going until our leadership on our team feels like they're qualified. And qualified represents a lot of different areas. It's not only how they play, right? It's their commitment to our team. It's social conduct. It's academics. It's all the values of our program. And so it's a huge honor to get to select. But the feedback is, man, our team is telling each individual where their current status is. Sometimes that's more powerful in a young person's development than information from a coach.
Okay, thank you, Coach.
All right, thanks, everybody.